Welcome everybody to the session What's New MECOMS 365 for CIS MDM. Let me first introduce ourselves. My name is Ine Buschots. I work now 12 years for Ferranti, 7 years in projects and 5 years as a solution designer for the product organization. And for the current project, MECOMS 365, I'm working part-time in the technical team and also helping in the day-to-day operational support. And this is my colleague Peter Jan.
So my name is Peter Jan, hello. I'm also a solution designer at the NPO, the MECOMS product organization. I've been working for Ferranti for 7 years, and for this upgrade to 365, I'm working on the part of the functional team.
Well, as a software company, we need to make sure we're future-proof and that our product evolves. And in our case, we want to make sure we're on the latest Microsoft platform. You might recognize this. This is our MECOMS 365 platform. And what's the evolution that Microsoft is going through? Well, the blue bars, Azure, we're on the cloud now, and we're moving to a new application platform. And in this session, we're going to focus on the customer information system and the meter data management and the things we are doing to make sure that our product MECOMS evolves to the new platform. An important thing I want to mention, we're doing a technology upgrade in this release. What does this mean? Well, we started from Microsoft Dynamics AX, also known as AX 2012, and we started from our latest released software. It says MECOMS R4. We used a Microsoft tool to migrate all this code to the new platform, the Microsoft Dynamics 365 for finance and operation. And that's the time where MECOMS 365 for CIS and MDM was born. So in this release, we're taking all the functionality from R4 and moving it to the new platform, making sure that everything still works well within a scope, and some architectural improvements. So no new features for now in this release. Next up, I want to show, tell you the impact of this technology upgrade to you as a customer. The first thing is we optimized release frequency. Let me first explain you the things we did and then why we did it. Again, the same picture. On the left, you see our MECOMS R4 release, and on the right, our MECOMS 365 release. And what's the big change that we did? Well, we made it modular. We took functionality code and we placed it in different modules. Each module can represent a group of functionalities or a supporting role to other modules. And a module doesn't always stand on its own, but it has dependencies with each other. For example, one model holds then the customer table. Well, a lot of those models will need to use that model to be able to function. For example, something changes in one model. Well, we immediately know the dependencies to that model, and we can put our focus on those models to make sure that they all work. Well, and this helps us to decrease the frequency of our releasing. Why are we now putting focus on why do we want to release much quicker than we did before? But on the other hand, for MECOMS 365, we also want to make sure we can quickly release new features, new updates, and those things. And on the other side, there's Microsoft. They have a new release policy. It's called the Modern Lifecycle Policy. And it states that you should always be on the current version and take in service updates within a specific time frame. So it means that you should always make sure you're on the latest release as soon as possible. And this implies that we also should make sure that our product is on the latest release, so you can also upgrade to the latest release. The next impact is closely related. It's optimized the quality. Again, the same picture. For example, something changes in that module. Well, we are investing a lot in automated testing, and we run those automated testing so we can see what the impact is of that change to the other models using automated testing. Microsoft, for example, has an update. We install the update on our product. We run all our automated testing on the modules, and we can quickly identify the impact of a Microsoft update and react to it.
Zijn messages die hier op mijn Skype kunnen komen.
Ja, dat was. Ja. The next impact is we optimized storage. As I said before, it's now cloud-based, and data storage is becoming very important. And I'd like to show you with an example what we did to optimize our storage to make sure we don't store a lot of redundant data. But I'll explain it with an example how it used to work before. For example, you have a file with meter indexes and you want to import them into MECOMS. Well, you use some kind of disk scanner or preprocessor to push the data in. Well, import it into MECOMS, and then it's being pushed into a journal. That's how it used to work before. This is our journal data. What did we do next? We run some validation on this journal. Does a connection exist? Is it alive on this date? Yes or no? And there's a possibility that we have some fallout from this validation, and you should handle that. If this part is okay, well, then we're going to transform it into internal data. And it's on that data that we run our processes like rate the consumption and send it to the customer, all those things. So it shows that we're only using this data to do our processes with, and this becomes redundant because it's exactly the same and only that one is used. So what did we do? We removed the journals. That's the change, the optimizing of the storage. It's closely related to our next impact, in which is the optimizing of the integration. So I'll show you now what did we do to replace parts of the functionality that the journals did. Again, our internal data, where all processes run on. For example, you have a portal and the customer enters an index value and says, oh, send it to my supplier. It will go to the SOAP and the REST endpoints. Then we will do some basic validation on it. Is this even a valid date? Is the EN a good EN? Yes or no? If it's not, we push it back immediately to the customer. We do not store anything. We just say, oh, this is crappy data. You have it back. Please fix it and then try again. But if it does succeed with the validation, we go on to our internal validation. We do some more thorough validations, like, again, is the connection live on this date? Yes or no? Again, it's a possibility that it fails and it comes into the import error list, or it passes, everything is fine, again, to our internal data where all our processes can work on. What's the big difference now? Here we had our journal data. Well, and this was the part that went wrong. So this is the part we do not store anymore. Only here the internal data, the same as we had before. And from the errors, there's a part that the basic validation used. We don't store it anymore, and only this part is stored. So optimization of these data, we do not store anymore. The next impact is also user experience. When we develop forms in Dynamics, Microsoft has form patterns. What is this? A form pattern? you want to create a form with a lot of data, and then you can choose between certain form patterns, which Microsoft says, oh, now you should use this kind of pattern. It says, oh, user grid, mandatory, filters are mandatory and are placed on the left, and an action bar needs to be placed on top. And that's what we are doing for all our MECOMS forms, making sure they are 100% compliant with these patterns. Well, why are we doing that? Of course, guidance and consistency, it's similar to the forms that standard AX has. So the look and feel is the same. You can immediately see, oh, the filters are always on the left, and everything is the same. Compatibility with upgrades. If Microsoft decides to change something in a pattern, well, it's applied to our forms too. Responsive layout. Microsoft knows with the pattern, oh, you're not going to show a lot of data or are showing, you should use this pattern, and then performance increases. And it's also good to show this pattern on other devices like a tablet or a mobile device. And Peter is going to do a demo later on, and he is also going to show the impact of those patterns on our forms. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ian. So now I would like to talk to you about what is the impact on our customers of our approach to this technology upgrade. And then before I can talk about the impact, I first need to shortly describe our approach. So as Ina mentioned, when we started our tech team, they migrated all the data from the 2012 version onto the 365 platform. And at that point, we started to wonder, how can we make sure that all the functionality that was working in 2012 will still work correctly on the 365 platform? So at that point, we started to make a big inventory of all the functional use cases that we want to support on the 365 version. We started with very broad functional use cases. Functional use cases saying, I as a user can do this in the system, I as a user can do that in the system. We started very broad, saying something like, okay, I want to be able to generate an invoice. Then we became a bit more detailed, saying, okay, I want to be able to create an advance, a periodic invoice, or an end note. Up until very detailed use cases saying, I as a user want to be able to invoice a consumption using a tariff that uses volume slicing, for example. And then to make sure we were complete with all those functional use cases that we started to think of, we also had a look at our MECOMS value chain. For people who don't know the MECOMS value chain, it's a set of business processes and business activity typically run by a utility supplier to go from their, or to support their prospect to cash business process. So we had a look at the MECOMS value chain to make sure that we supported the full business chain. And then we started to document those use cases, and we also used our MECOMS value chain to organize our documentation. So our documentation is now based on the business processes and the business activities as defined in our MECOMS value chain. Okay. So at that point we had a big backlog of all these functional use cases that were also documented according to the business processes. So at that point we also started to think, okay, how do we now want to run all those functional use cases inside our new MECOMS 365 product? So at that point, we started to define test cases. Click on this button, enter this data, then you'll see this happen, then you'll see that happen. And not only did we specify all the test cases, we also started to create all the test data needed to do those test cases. So at that point, we had a big backlog of all the documented functional use cases, with test cases, with test data ready. And then they were ready to be picked up in sprints. So our technical team, they work in sprints in 3 weekly sprints. In the beginning of the sprint, they have a look at the backlog, see what the highest priority is on the backlog, and then they start taking in the use cases, upgrading the code, making sure that no journals are used anymore, making sure all the forms that are used comply with the new form patterns, make sure that all the test cases are run successfully. And at that point, then we say at the end of the sprint, okay, now these functional use cases are upgraded onto the 365 version. And Ine also mentioned the automated test cases. This is of course necessary because the 3 weekly sprints, each time we do a new sprint, we want to make sure we didn't break anything we delivered in the previous sprint. So our most important functional use cases do have automated tests that run every night. Okay, and so this is our approach, and we did that together with our charter client, which is Waternet. Waternet, the water utility company of the city of Amsterdam. They are now, we are doing this together with them, as they are planning to go live. They are already a MECOMS customer for many years, but they plan to go live with a subset of their customers on a 365 version of MECOMS before the end of the year. So they've been taking in many of our sprints and working on that, on getting that system ready before the end of the year. So we are very excited about that. There will also be somebody talking from Waternet, I think on Wednesday, that will be then tomorrow. So please do visit them as well. Have a look at their presentation. So, okay, so that was then the approach, but I wanted to talk about the impact of this approach. The first impact is because we only consider functional use cases to be upgraded when all the test cases are successful, we can guarantee the quality of our functional use cases and the functionality in the 365 platform. And because we work together with our charter client, who will have a live system up and running before the end of the year, then we can truly say that it will be proven software once we go to the market with our first release. Second impact is about the frequency with which we will release new versions of our software. This agile way of working with priorities in the backlog, 3 weekly sprints that always deliver a clear feature set that is upgraded, that allows us to do more frequent releases of new versions. And that is then related to what Ine mentioned before. Microsoft will also do a lot of upgrades of their technology. As a customer and we as a software vendor need to stay, need to keep up the same pace, stay up to date. So we need to do more frequent releases, and we will also use that as an opportunity to add more features to our software on a more frequent basis. Okay. So and then the last dead silence. The last topic I want to talk to you about is the comprehensive documentation. Important to mention is we've extended the existing documentations, we added all the functional use cases, and we organized it via the MECOMS value chain, so the business processes. And then the advantage that we see on that is that it will be more easy for business users using our system on a daily basis to find what they are looking for when the documentation is also structured according to business processes and business activities. On the other hand, for technical people who are more focused on maybe certain features of MECOMS, it will also help them to have an insight in where a certain feature of the MECOMS application fits in to the overall business process. So we think it's a win-win situation for both types of users of our documentation. I also highlighted the test cases because we released the test cases. The test cases will be released with the software as well as the test data that we used. So I also think there is a lot of useful information in seeing how we test all that functionality in the 365 version. So that's also a lot of useful documentation for end customers, I think. True, Ian, or not?
True.
Okay. So what is the status as of today of our technology upgrade? We did this process together with Waternet. So we had a discussion with Waternet in the beginning of our technology upgrade, like, okay, what is the priority? What functionality do you need when to get your system up and running before the end of the year? Okay, so then the first part we worked on was functionality on the product design. The MECOMS MECOMS invoices are created based on products and their product components, items as we call them. So we delivered a lot of functionality around that. We also delivered a number of use cases around pricing so that they were able to set up tariffs, conditional tariffs, tariffs with dependencies, discounts. So at that point, they were able to send out invoices, periodic invoices, advances, endnotes, that kind of stuff. And then as soon as they had sent, or as they sent the invoices to their customers, they will need some functionality around payments and collections. So we also already provided them with that. So that's being able to send out direct debit payments, receiving payments, matching payments. If customer doesn't pay, send out collection letters and whatnot. And of course, they also needed some functionality around meter data management, being able to receive meter readings, validate them, estimate them, use those meter readings to calculate consumptions, estimate consumptions, validate consumptions. That stuff. So those blocks we've already provided to them. And then currently we're working on these blocks, being the sales, contract intake, contract fulfillment, and contract management. And that is then the whole process from signing up a new customer, making sure that all the technical data, connections, meters, channels can be set up in the system or are created in the system. And then also some functionality around contract maintenance, adding a connection to a contract or removing a connection from a contract. So that is something we plan on finishing up in the next couple of weeks. And then the last part that we will work on this year will be around customer services, so the ability or use cases to make sure that you can help your customer when they contact you or with a question or a complaint. And then all that functionality will make up the scope of our first release that we will bring to the market, being our R1 release. And as we've done this together with our charter client Waternet, it will have a focus on a water integrated company functionality. So, okay, so now I would like to give you a demonstration of this new version of the software. And but let's, for all time's sake, first have a quick look at the current version of MECOMS, just so that you can really appreciate the difference between the current version and the new version. So, current version, fat client, navigation pane on the left, menu items in the middle. If we want to have a look at all the customers, I click on the all customers. All the customer or the customer grid view is shown in the middle, with on the top the ribbon bar, and then you can double click on a row in the grid, and a customer details screen will open up with in the middle again the customer data, and on the left the links to the related data of the customer. So okay, let me just have a look. Okay, so I don't have any fat clients installed anymore on my machine. I just need a web browser. Your favorite web browser will do. In my case, that is Google Chrome. And then you can easily navigate to the URL of your environment that is somewhere hosted in Azure. So this is my test environment. And then the first screen that opens up is the overview of all the workspaces that are available in MECOMS 365. Now I'll talk about, or I'll come back to what a workspace is, and I'll also show a workspace later on in the demonstration. I first want to just quickly navigate to the screens that I also showed in the screenshot of the 2012 version. So if you want to navigate in MECOMS 365, you just need to find the navigation pane. It is hidden here behind this hamburger sign, or the three horizontal lines. If you then click on it, it pops up. It will automatically hide again unless you pin it. And the navigation pane of the 365 version is similar to the one in 2012. You will have your favorites on top, your recently used menu items, all the workspaces, on which I'll come back later on. And then below that you'll see all the modules, and these modules, they contain or they group the functionality per, they group the functionality. And then you can see that they are ordered alphabetically, and then on top you see the groups of functionality related to standard ERP functionality, accounts payable, receivable, some general ledger, some HR modules. So that is all the stuff that comes out of the box with the finance and operations functionality. But I want to talk about the MECOMS modules that are shown here. So they all have the MECOMS prefix. And what we are currently working on is also aligning those modules to have the same structure as our documentation and have the same structure as our MECOMS value chain, so that it's all one-on-one and easy to find in MECOMS. But of course, there's also always some data or functionality that is used throughout the whole value chain, and that functionality we've grouped in what we call our MECOMS core module. So in there also we find our all customers menu item. If you have a look, you'll recognize also how they structured the menu items in the 365 version. It is quite similar with the inquiries and reports, some periodic tasks, some setup. So that is all fairly familiar. And then on top, you'll always have the entities of data that is used in those modules. In this case, it's customers, connections, and physical assets. So I can click on all customers. At that point, the grid view of all my customers is shown. Maybe nice to know if I click on the navigation pane again, it still opens up just like I left it, so that I can do some more navigation in the same module if I want, without having to extra click. And well, maybe nice to know is if you press the little star next to a menu item, then you can see it becomes one of your favorites. So that's also fun to know. So if we then look at the customer list page, you can see, okay, this is the same ribbon bar that we saw in the 2012 version, just it's now stripped of the little icons, but the layout, the different tabs, the functionality behind the different tabs is still the same as in the 2012. So that is, it's useful for people who work on a day-to-day basis in the 2012 version. Once they switch to the 365 version, they will still find their way around. So that's also very important for us. And then below you have the grid of all the customers in our system. The easiest way to start navigating data in a grid in 365 is using this thing called quick filter. So if I start typing, I can see as soon as I start typing, it says like, okay, on which field do you want to filter? Is it, can you see it, or should I? Can't see it. Let's see if I can change it. It becomes a bit bigger. See if this is better. Is that better or not? Not much.
And what if you...
Something like this?
Yeah.
Okay. So as soon as I start typing data in the little box, it starts, it asks like, okay, on which of these different fields do you want to filter? And that are the fields that are also shown in the grid. And then it's nice to know that even though it's no longer a fat client, you can still have that let's personalize this form ability. So if I want to, for example, add an extra field to this grid, let's say the method of payment of the customer. And then also maybe nice to know is that whenever you have such a grid, you can also just click on the heading of on the header, and you can start filtering or sorting, so that functionality is still available. So okay, I want to add the method of payment field. I press insert, and all of a sudden this field is there. And then if I, for example, all my direct debit payments, so okay, all my customers who pay by direct debit, and then this list is shown. So, and then I have the list of all the direct debit customers. And then maybe also, if I double click on one of those lines that of course no longer works, it's web-based, so you need to work via the links that show up whenever you hover over the line. So for example, if I want to have a look at my John Smith customer, then the details of my customer are shown. And then it's the same layout. In the middle, you have all the information of your customer, with organized via tabs, with some preview functionality. I can see that the terms of payment of this customer is 14 days end of the month. But the big difference with the current version is all these links to data that is related to this customer. It used to be on the left side, but now it's on top. Why did we do that? We applied, as Ine mentioned, these form patterns on this form, just to make sure that whenever Microsoft decides to change something in the user interface or upgrades some functionality, we always, our screens will still look good in the new version. So that's very important for us. So I can navigate to the connections, and if I then open up, for example, a connection of the customer, okay, it has the same layout. In the middle, you have all the data of the connection grouped, all the functionalities grouped by these tabs that you can easily open or close, and you also have this preview version. Okay, this is a yearly read connection, and then on top you have that same layout. So by using these form patterns, you have a certain consistency when you navigate through the system.
And it works on iPad, iMac, and rest.
True. So, the best thing to do is just use this URL and type it in on your iPhone or iPad or whatever device you're using, and you'll see that you can still navigate it. because it's a web interface. And as you can see, the moment I start resizing my screen, you also see that the layout adapts and that the layout is structured in the most optimal way of the size that you're looking at it. And maybe also something you noticed is no new screens pop up. They just cascade on top of each other. So if I just close this connection screen, I'm back at the customer screen. And I use this little X, but if I now navigate back to the connection, you can also use the navigate back functionality of the browser.
Can you open them in another tab or put them side by side or something like that?
There is some functionality to do opening a new window, but that only works as long as there is a relation between the two screens. So I think a good example to show this is maybe have a list of all your journals of your in General Ledger. If you have all your journals, and in the other screen you have all the details that are in that journal, so a header detail view. As soon as you then switch in one screen to the other header, all the details will be refreshed in the other screen. So maybe if you have an invoice open with some invoice details in the other screen, you can quickly navigate to the other header, and then the other screen opens up. Otherwise, you just need to, I think, just create a new session in another browser window, and then you can navigate independently of the two. So these are all the invoices of this customer. And now if I close this screen, okay, then it stays open. And if I then say truce, now this is what I meant. Yeah. Okay. So if I.
That's for the.
If you copy the.
But it's the same as before, because in 2012,
Yeah,
the same forms where you have the invoice form open, you change customer and well, some of them.
Some of them.
Yeah, it is. I think as long as there is a link between the two screens, like this, then it works.
Yeah, but even if you don't have a link, then you see them independently, but you can still see them side by side.
Yeah.
But if you navigate to another custom, maybe it doesn't reflect any other screen.
Yeah. The moment I noticed is if I close this, I thought the other screen would also. So.
Yeah,
Then-
that's normal.
Then the other screen closes.
That's normal.
Okay.
If you close, that's the same. That when you close your client in AX 2012, well, then the forms you had open will also be gone. But yeah,
Okay.
I think it would work.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay. So I was looking at our John Smith. So, and as I mentioned, we've already upgraded a lot of functionality from the 2012 version to 365. So, for example, show them already if I navigate to all the invoices of this customer, I can open up the invoice, have a look at the details, see that this invoice was created using a fixed price electricity product. This fixed price electricity product contains of a number of cost components, some consumption items, some administrative cost, and some other items. And then for this consumption cost, we can see, okay, a quantity of 1200 was used. So okay, maybe we need to look at the connection. And have a look at the meter data of that connection. So if I then navigate to the connection and then select the consumption validation, then I can also see, indeed, in the year 2017, there was a consumption registered of 1200 kilowatt hours. So, and then as soon as we send out this invoice to the customer, he can start paying them, and we can start receiving payments. And when the customer doesn't pay, we can start sending him collection letters or calling him, and that brings me then back to what I would come back on, and that is these workspaces. So what is a workspace? A workspace in 365 is a screen that is optimized with some KPI data, some graphical representation of data, some list views and some links, and they're all optimized to perform one certain task. So I'll have a look at my workspace to do the follow-up of my my payments and collections. So the customer who didn't pay yet. So my customer credit in collection workspace. And if I open up this space, it starts showing me with a list of some KPIs, which with some cubes, tiles that I can click on. There's also some graphical representation of some data that is useful while I'm doing this task. I have some lists of data. In this case, these are all the customers who have an outstanding, already aged debt. Can we ignore this? And then on the left side, you also have some links that are very easy. From there on, you can easily navigate to all the functionality that you need to do your daily task at hand. So, and if I close this up again, then the overview of all the workspaces that are standard out of the box available in 365 are shown. Now, our ID currently, we are working on also providing workspaces for MECOMS, but this is still work in progress. So my main takeaway points from this demonstration would be, okay, no more fat clients, web-based user interface. We are in the progress of upgrading all this functionality onto the 365 version. And secondly, or lastly, even though it has a new user interface, it will still feel familiar for people who on a daily basis are working in the 2012 version. And I think Ina will also mention something about what's next.
Yeah, the last topic for this session is what's up next. The release schedule, as Pieter-Jan said before, the R1 will be released by the end of the year, and the scope has been explained by Pieter-Jan. And what's our plan for next year? Well, it's not set in stone, but the plan is that we're going to deliver 4 more releases next year. Now you might be wondering, what's the scope of these releases? Well, it's not defined yet. Because we're working agile, that's what Pieter-Jan also said, we have scope priorities. And what have an influence on these priorities? Well, that's the Microsoft releases. We need to make sure that our product is also compliant with the latest Microsoft releases. If they change something, we should also change it, and that can have an impact on our priority. Our own MECOMS product backlog, what's inside that, technical and functional things, items that we should do, there are things that we want to do, we want to improve functionalities or add new functionalities, that's in there. Then we have a charter, but we also have an early adopter. They're already working with beta versions of our current release. They have a planning for their project. Well, we want to make sure that they can meet their planning so that we can deliver functionalities that they need on time so they can continue. Then there's also the sales priorities. If sales see something in the market that changes, evolves, they know that customers ask a lot of a certain functionality or so, yeah, they can also influence our scope priority. If you want to know what will be in the next releases, you can check out the Yammer, the customer Yammer and the partner Yammer, because we will be announcing there the release schedule and the content of the next releases.